Hello, welcome to the Health In Show, an affiliate program of Homeopathy World Community. You've come to the right place to tune in and participate with your comments and questions. Love is the greatest healer of all. But sometimes, in order to change our emotions, we must take action in other spheres of our lives. We speak with experts in alternative and complementary health fields and hope you will benefit in some small or great way. Remember, you are wherever your thoughts are. Make sure your thoughts are where you want to be.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome. This is the Health and Show, and my name is Marilyn Shannon, and I am so delighted to be here with all of you today. This is a show that I would say it's exactly what a homeopath would order or a doctor would order, because it's exactly what we need today. So as we get on with the show, let me remind all of you to please feel free to put your name, nickname, whatever you like under the video, and you can comment, add ask questions, whatever you like, make a statement. We'd love to have you. If you'd like to call into the studio, you can do that as well. That number is 919-518-9773. And you can also come in on Skype, and that would be computers. That's plural. Then the number 2K voice, and you'll come in on voice, not video. So don't worry about how you look. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter even if you came in on video. We don't care what you look like. We're just happy you're here. So anyway, we're really delighted. So I want to thank Amnon as always. He's in the back end, making sure that the show runs smoothly, and it will. So let me go ahead and introduce our guest to you today, Georgia Barnhill. Welcome, Georgia.
Hi, thanks very much. Glad to be here, Marilyn.
It's a pleasure to have you. I'm so happy. And Georgia does a myriad of things. And one of the things is that she is a master practitioner of E.F.T. And if you haven't had an experience with E.F.T, you're going to hear all about it today and some other things. So, Georgia, tell everybody what you do.
Okay, well, certainly I've studied energy work for about 30 years, starting with Reiki and quantum touch and learning about homeopathy, using remedies, and also looking at the energetics of food. But finally, I realized, as your introduction said, I didn't really like the way my thoughts were going. And so I realized I needed to have some tools to help me change that. So emotional freedom techniques, also known as tapping, has really been my doorway into creating the life I want and sort of unearthing those unconscious limiting beliefs. So certainly grateful to the tapping world, and I do it every day.
So, for people who have no idea what you're talking about, can you explain what tapping does and why we tap?
Okay, so tapping, and I'll just take you through a little round of tapping. We tap on the endpoints of various meridians, right where the hair starts on the eyebrow, the side of the eye, underneath the eye, underneath the nose, underneath the lip, just here underneath the collarbone. And then we can do a monkey tap underneath our arms or the tops of our heads. Those are what we would call the major tapping points, and that's a round of tapping. There's other places we tap to, like the side of the hand, and we can tap or squeeze the fingers. Those are all endpoints of energy meridians. And so the tapping is shown to do a number of things. The mechanical stimulation helps the energy flow through those meridians, particularly on the face. The piezoelectric effect of the mechanical tapping also stimulates nerves that feed into the vagus nerve, which is our master nerve for our autonomic nervous system. So what the tapping does is that it brings down sort of overactivation from fight or flight into a state where we're more calm and safe, according to our amygdala, which is our nervous system fire alarm. And from that place, we can gain new perspective on things that are bothering us. and we can actually remove emotional triggers to things that bother us. That's the short story.
And so how does that happen exactly? Like, how does it remove the unhealthy emotional stuff?
Okay, so there's been a lot of research on this, and the amygdala and the emotional part of the brain, the limbic system, hold memories of an event or experience. There's an emotional component, a body sensory component, thoughts that we tell ourselves, and then there's a behavioral component like urges. So those are all part of every experience that we have. And if we have not processed that information, then that gets stored away as a trauma. So what happens is in the tapping, first we activate that old memory, whether it was last week or 30 years ago. So the activation actually fires up the same cells in the neurons that were there at the time of the event. And then as we tap, we reduce cortisol, we change our brain chemistry. And those neurons those activated neurons, the receptors, are actually taken apart, and then the memory is stored differently. So we can still remember the event, but we don't have the emotional trigger. That's basically what the research is showing. So it frees us from the old stuff.
So depending upon where you tap, are there certain memories stored in certain areas?
The tapping doesn't seem to have an impact on particular places of memory. They've done a lot of brain scans to show, when you connect to a certain memory, these are the neurons that fire up. But the endpoints here are all related to a specific meridian. Now, some people, certainly Roger Callahan, way back in the 80s, 90s, who developed the original tapping called thought field therapy, he had a number of algorithms, tap on this and that one for certain things. But as Gary Craig refined the process, the basic recipe that I showed you is, it kind of hits all the bases, and it will uncouple that emotional response. So I don't think it really matters which meridian you're tapping on, although maybe it does. Who knows? I don't think we've uncovered that research yet.
It would be interesting because I'm just thinking
Yeah.
out loud and thinking to myself, well, if you tap under the eyes or
Mm-hmm.
around the eye, does that release a memory of something that you saw?
Good
Right?
question.
In
Good
the
question.
head, we have those neural pathways where,
Yeah.
if you tap on those, does it shake it up a little? I mean, it just
Yeah,
seems to make sense.
it does. And I think that's a really good question. I think that certainly each experience has, those different channels of experience. So, we may see something, we may hear something. Those are all the and we may feel something in the body. And those are all somatosensory aspects. So I'm not aware of research that answers your question, but maybe there is.
So with your clients, I suppose that hasn't come up. I mean, nobody has said, "Oh man, I tapped on my mouth and now I can say this." That hasn't happened.
Not in that way. No, what I would do in a coaching situation would be to examine okay, we would look at that event. So what's the experience of that event? Well, I felt, it's constriction here, and I was really frightened, and I just wanted to shout something out, and I just couldn't do it. So, okay, so we do some tapping on those. And so then in a coaching framework, it would be, okay, so now that we've developed some perspective, let's say, well, what if you could say something, and what would that be? And so then, we would work through developing a plan for that client to, say what they needed to say. So
Yeah.
that's how that would work.
And I always believe that it is very important. So I'm glad you said what you just said, that when you do any modality, when you experience any modality, I don't even care if it's massage therapy or acupuncture, that you sit with someone who can help you process the results. I mean, if you're going to go for massage therapy, something's going to pop up. Same thing with acupuncture, same thing with E.F.T. I mean, with any of these, right? You want to sit with somebody. So I would highly recommend that you make sure that you do that, because when this stuff starts to fire and these feelings and questions and memories pop up, you got to have somebody that you can talk to about it, because it isn't going away just because it came up.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it's really interesting, like our memories and the neural networks connected to them, they're not linear. You start thinking about the fight you had with your boss, and then something comes up and you're taken to, an argument you had with your grandmother, and then the time that you fell off your bicycle. And, all of these things do come up. They're all connected in there. One of the things that I start with clients is helping them use the tapping and other energy medicine techniques to find a safe place of self-regulation. So if you can tap, say, for emotional first aid, or do it regularly to build kind of a resilient nervous system, then your days are gonna be a little smoother and not be going all haywire. So once a client can use that to develop that skill, that self-regulation, then we can really look safely at what comes up when it comes up.
So let me ask you a quick question. So when you're working with somebody and you're instructing them on how to do this, do they have to tap everywhere each time, or is there an effect from tapping a few places? And what's the difference between tapping under the eye and under the chin than adding everything else? What's the advantage or disadvantage?
Okay, so yes, people will have favorite tapping points and points they hate. So you don't have to be systematic, nor do you have to tap every one. I do it just as an illustration. When I'm just tapping for myself, I tend to go around the face. That's what feels good for me. I used to hate tapping under the arm. I used to hate tapping on my head. I'm okay now with those. So who knows, maybe some kind of energetic shift has shown for me. But certainly, say somebody's got some sinus problems, well, I would go here. I mean, this is the stomach meridian, but it also affects the sinuses. So this can really help clear. And then this is the governing meridian, this is the central meridian. Sometimes I'll tap those both together, and then that gets the energy flow and grounds as well. So there are, sort of peripheral reasons to tap on certain places. And this is the small intestine. So this is where you digest things, whether it's thoughts or events or emotions. Generally, I think the research shows that if you use a number of tapping points, not necessarily 100% of them, you're going to get results. And again, I think it's kind of that shotgun effect. If you try more than one, you're likely going to have more success. Again, the research doesn't point to 1 or 2 points as being more effective than others.
So this is fascinating. So I think I have a burning desire to know about your history. Because I mean, it's 30 years ago wasn't unusual to start doing Reiki.
Mhm.
30 years ago, I mean, it seems like a long time ago if you're, 20, but for me, for you, probably not
Yeah,
so much.
not so much.
So what, I mean, and that was even an interesting thing to do back then. So what got you to open up to energy?
Oh, I guess because my life had been so confined and tight, and I was, had suppressed every emotion I had ever experienced. So I was living in a tight little world and had a lot of health problems. And I ran into a woman who was a Reiki practitioner standing outside her shop saying, "Come on in." Okay. And, that was the doorway.
So you did all levels of Reiki then, I am
I
assuming?
did. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yes. Yes. And I've loved it. And the, the more I learned about energy work, and particularly after I started tapping, was for me, the tapping really supercharged all those other practices. It puts me in a better place to meditate. It puts me in a better place to feel the energy from any other kind of energy work.
So this may be a weird question, but I'm a listener. Okay. So when the weirder questions that kind of sort of makes sense, I just go with because I
Okay.
figure it isn't up to me. It's being downloaded and I need to ask. So drumming, there
Mm,
seems to be, based on what you said, a
yeah.
connection between drumming and tapping. Now, I don't know if anybody, I mean, I don't, maybe that's a common thing, not for me. So, and maybe not for our audience either, because I have no idea. I'm just thinking it.
Yeah, really interesting. I have been involved with a local shamanic community for a number of years. And since I started tapping, I find that I am much more open to experience the various energy shifts in the shamanic work. And certainly drumming is one of my favorite things to do because it really does, it just surrounds us in this living energy. And so, again, don't know about any research on that, but certainly I experience drumming I mean, it's magical.
Yeah, it seems to me that tapping is a form of drumming.
I'd agree. Yeah, definitely.
Uh-huh. And so that kind of like tick 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 kind of thing is the same thing that you would do if you were drumming. Drumming has a
Yes.
sound, you
Yeah.
know,
Mhm.
tapping doesn't.
Mhm.
So very interesting.
Yes, and the drumming has a vibration, particularly if you're doing the drumming and you're holding the drum in your energy field. It's amazing.
Yeah, well, that's what
Mhm.
it
Yeah.
does. I mean, you end up kind of moving
Yeah.
with it, right?
Yeah.
And then the same thing with the tapping does
Yes.
something internally that almost like your internal organs start to move with the tapping.
Yes, and absolutely. As you tap, you bring yourself into your what they would call your ventral vagal nervous system, which is where all the healing, the social engagement, the creativity, that's where we need to be for all of that to happen.
Sure, it's the present moment.
Yeah,
Can't happen any other place.
that's for sure.
So that's another thing that it does. It brings you into the present moment.
Yes, absolutely.
So, considering what is going on now in the world, which, there's when you look at the world and what's going on, I'm not the person that's going to say things are like based on the world today, because there's always been stuff going on. I mean, there's always something. If you want to look,
Mhm.
there's always been, the world has always had its issues. I mean, that's basically what the world has, right? And it's
Yeah.
part of our work is to tap or to drum or to find the energy source or to find those places on this planet and within ourselves that help us experience another level of consciousness. Are you, based on your own tapping and your own personal work, what are you finding when you go inside of all of this and the energy? What are you seeing? What are you privy to? Knowing energy like you do, I'm also imagining the intuition. Your intuition is clearer coming up because when you're tapped into the energy in the present moment, I mean, that's what you got. What can you tell us about what you're seeing, experiencing?
Okay, so certainly from a big picture perspective, like we are all processing decades and lifetimes of collective trauma. And this is what's being reflected in what's out there. And so it feels to me like it's our responsibility to be more personally grounded and responsible.
So
and
can I interrupt you 1 second?
Yeah,
okay.
Sure.
And is that okay with you? Because if you say something that I gotta kind of interrupt you on, is that okay with you?
Of course, go ahead.
Okay, good. So are you saying that what we're seeing now is the trauma of what was, or the trauma, right? Okay, so what we're seeing now is somebody's trauma, right?
Yes.
Okay, I want to make clear. Okay, now could you go on with the rest of that?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, we all carry trauma. I mean, you can't not carry it. But for those who can use the energy work, whether it's, drumming or tapping or homeopathy, to become more present and have more energetic integrity, then we're going to help ground a connected, peaceful, safe energy. And the thing with it is that we're all connected, so there's co-regulation that happens. So the more of us who can be grounded and safe and processing the energy, then the more that will help those who are still off flying up in the air. And certainly that research that showed that if a group of people meditated, that violence would decrease. That's an indication of co-regulation and how we can energetically impact the whole.
Wow, that's exactly right, and that makes perfect sense. So we meet in coherence, right? We meet in being coherent. Mm-hmm. And for those of you who may not, this is my simple way of saying what coherence is. It's when your heart and your head are together. They're married in a good way. They're married, they're connected, and they work in sync with each other. The ego does not live in coherence, at least not the unhealthy part of our ego. We live healthy in there. Interesting. So are you seeing these shifts? How?
Yes, I'm seeing more and more people realizing that there are things they can do to change their lives. So we don't have to wear our labels. She's got anger issues, or she'll always be a failure in business, or we carry all of these old limiting beliefs. And yet now we're waking up to the fact that yes, they're beliefs, but they're not who we are. And so how can we actually free ourselves from that framework that we've been lugging around? So all kinds of things, meditation, tapping, homeopathy, all of those work together to help us shift our energy. And then when we can shift that, if we can intentionally set a course towards what we want, then we're going to build new neural networks to support those changes in our lives.
So let me just back up 1 second for everyone. So when we talked about coherence, the more we do what Georgia is suggesting, and what many of you already know, is that we find ourselves in a zone together. And when we find ourselves in that zone together, we are tapped into the good stuff. And the good stuff is far, 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 far more powerful than that other stuff. So the more we can tap into the good stuff together, the better it is. And I would say, even if you just sat in a room with someone and you came from your heart and you looked at this other person and you said, that person's going to, don't even say a word, just sit there. You don't need to say anything. You just need to be in your heart, stare at somebody. That person is going to feel it to the point where they may even get uncomfortable and start moving around. That's how powerful your heart energy is and your intention. Is that right? would you say?
Yeah, absolutely. Certainly, there's a lot of indications that I don't know whether you're probably familiar with, what is it, Richard R. Hawkins or David R. The levels of consciousness
Power
guy, and
versus the guy that
yeah,
did Power versus Force.
absolutely. I mean, that is so important when you think of those levels, and shame and anger being at the bottom. Those are all reflections of a nervous system too that's locked down into freeze. So the parallels there in the levels of consciousness and where you are in your nervous system are there. And so as you come up that scale, into maybe anger, well, anger is more active, so you're in fight or flight. And at least you may not be making the right choices or the right actions, but at least you're moving. And then if you get a little higher on that scale where you have a different perspective, your view of life changes. And you're in the part of your nervous system where you can make things happen, you can be present. So it's those levels of consciousness and that place in the nervous system. Deb Dana, who's a polyvagal theory expert, has this statement that says state equals story. So if you're in shutdown, if you're in freeze, your story is, I can't do a thing, I'm stuck. If you're in fight or flight and you're angry, then your story is, well, I have to do this, I have to be aggressive, or I have to run away. But if your level of consciousness and your nervous system is in that, that sweet spot, your story is, I can connect, I can engage, I'm safe, I can create. So those things are really important. And the number of people, say, at a higher level of consciousness, the co-regulation and capacity to lift others up is really significant. So as you say, the heart math stuff, the is really important. The strength of your heart energy field when in coherence with your brain, that really extends beyond us and lifts other people up.
So you mentioned heart math. Why did you mention that?
Well, heart math talks about coherence.
How do you know about, are you a heart math person?
Yes, I am. That's another
Can you tell that I am too?
Yes.
How did you tell? Because I said heart coherence?
Yeah, coherence between heart and head, of course. Because that's their basic framework for all of their research.
And how long ago did you do heart math?
Oh gosh, I think I started maybe 10 years ago. And yes, so it's always something that I kind of go back to.
Well, because it makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
So I am a heart math provider as well. I did it 20 years ago, I think. So for those of you who may not know about heart math is, 25 years ago. These gentlemen figured out the connection relationship between the heart and the head, and that the heart, we want to lead with the heart, not the head. We want to lead with the heart and let the head do what the heart says. And for those of you who are listening and say, well, but it's emotion. If you have too much emotion, it is not coming from your heart. It is coming from your head. It is not a balanced thing. Balance is in the heart, and you can experience emotion from the heart. So that's when we talk about coherence, and there's a whole bunch of other stuff that we can talk about from there. So yeah, George and I could have some fun talking about all this stuff, I'm sure.
Yeah, we could.
We are.
Yep.
So I just want to remind everyone, please feel free to call in, ask your questions, comment. What's your experience? What have you experienced? What have you felt? It's very interesting to put into words the experiences you have when you're living in your higher energy levels and what that feels like. I used to describe anger in a way, and I would say to clients, well, it's like flying through anger. It's like you don't land there. You kind of like, woof, you go through it and you're like, wow, that's empowering when you don't land there and you don't take it as a rule of thumb and get angry with somebody. You just pass through it and you find your wisdom in how else you can be. So please, take an opportunity now. Call us at 919-518-9773, or you can come in at Skype, and that's computers, that's plural, the number 2K voice. And you can also join us in the chat and just put your name, nickname, whatever you like under the window and ask us questions, comment, whatever. We'd love to invite you in here. And, everybody's got experiences, and we want to honor yours. And sometimes, the experiences we have when we're talking about energy is a personal thing. And sometimes it's in a moment that, you have something. Well, here's an opportunity to bring those experiences to life. Because when we talk about a collective consciousness and we talk about this collective way of working through trauma, it's because you shared. It's because George is sharing. It's because I will share. I mean, that's how we get through it. And the thing is, everybody's experiencing trauma, including our children. So it's very important to talk. Georgia, what are you thinking? Feeling?
Yes, I am feeling really glad to be having this conversation. Certainly, one of the things I found with tapping and heart math is that I was at one point always a victim of the emotional weather, whatever that was out there. And as you say, like, it never stays the same. But so I was just out there being blown around by all of that stuff and didn't ever have a solid foundation within myself to be grounded and to hold the weather in perspective. So certainly there are a lot of different doorways people can take. The tapping was really the one that opened the door for me to establish a more resilient nervous system. And then I've been able to use these other practices certainly more effectively and, put them together.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of these modalities. Some make more sense to you than others. Tapping makes sense. Acupuncture makes sense. Massage therapy makes sense. For me, heart math made a lot of sense. For me, it put logic into woo woo and woo woo into logic. And for me, that was very freeing. To understand how our system works and our autonomic nervous system and all of the cortisol stuff, all that stuff made perfect sense. And I can tell you that I have used it, I mean, throughout my life naturally, just in a moment when I'm feeling like the world is just, ugh, or my little world is, ugh, and I just put myself in that place. It's fascinating what can occur in those moments. So this is wonderful. Um, so other experiences that you've had with energy, when we talk about energy, what are we actually talking about?
Good question.
I don't
Gee.
know. Yeah. I mean, what are we really talking about?
Yes, indeed. Well, certainly we're riding around in an electromagnetic vehicle here that's, has more or less connection to the the energy around us. Certainly, ideally, we'd be grounded on the earth and able to pull in all of the cosmic energy and through this being, and then whatever filters we have give us the experience. But I mean, so many of us, and certainly myself included, were just totally disconnected from life force energy, which is really what we're all about. And yeah, my experience is certainly the more work I do, the more I'm able to solidly ground and perceive the energy around me and to start to direct its flow in a more conscious way. And some days are better than others.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting. I was thinking many years ago, I can remember, starting to evolve around this subject of energy and what that really was. And I was feeling good energy, right? And if you're feeling good energy, you still have to continue with work, because good energy can also be hurtful. It can turn to hurtful if you don't do something with it. If you just leave it there, it will turn. So you want to do things, continue your tapping so it's circulating, continue doing good work in the world. You know, do some charity, do some things that you can put your heart into that feels good for you. It's very, very important to continue all of that good energy. So let me ask you a question. First of all, tell us about your website and how you work with people. Let's do some good, like, bodacious marketing for you right now.
Okay. All right. Well, my business is called Energy for Transformation. I was really addicted to having like E.F.T in the business name. So anyway, energy, FOR transformation.com. And I use it in a coaching framework, which means that I work with people to, develop the capacity to self-regulate, and then to start to challenge some of the things that are in their way, and look at how we can, develop some goals to move ahead. I work with a lot of people around food, because my other area of research and study for a number of years has been holistic nutrition. And I've been working with a lot of people lately on tapping into a new relationship with food. So that has been really good. I mean, it's been good for me because it certainly it mirrors my journey through food and nutrition, and how I allow myself to accept the energy and be nourished by it, or how you can use the energy of food to self-sabotage. I mean, it should be nourishing, but sometimes we use it as punishment. So it's kind of interesting to explore that using tapping. And then we can start to really take small steps to make big changes.
And that's the thing. The small steps, to me, they're freedom steps. I don't call them small necessarily. That each step we take is a step towards freedom. So you want to keep doing that. And also, I have to remind people over and over and over again, myself, is also to take credit. Pat yourself on the back, acknowledge every step you take, every step. If you're watching this show and you never talked or heard anybody talk about energy before, hallelujah. If you get off of this show and you are mindful, about maybe just tapping under your nose, or thinking about going to Georgia, or reaching out to someone, or talking to somebody about something, do that, because we all are in the same boat. We all are experiencing things that are comfortable and not comfortable, things we want to avoid and things we want to jump into. And these modalities help you jump. They build your inner core.
They really do build our inner core, and that's critical. Then the other thing too is, now I've been to a lot of events myself where I've had these huge energetic shifts, just huge, like, oh my God, like the whole world opened up. But I didn't have any foundation or any bridge from where I was to that new place. So unless you take the freedom steps, you're going to fall back into where you are, because you don't have a roadmap. So from consistent freedom steps as you move along will get you there. If you expect to go from here to here immediately and to suddenly be perfect, forget about it. Because, yeah. So that's the way I work. Sustainable change really does take specific steps. And it also takes celebration, as you say. Wow, I did it. Look at that. Okay, I can do this again. And, that might stand in my way, but I think I can hack myself around that and keep going. So that's, yes.
Absolutely. I totally agree.
Yeah.
And part of that celebration is gratitude. if you want to hold these feelings of this enormous or little or small or freedom step energy burst or shift, acknowledge yourself, and then also find gratitude, because that is also outside of yourself. And you want to be thankful for what you got. And you can hold it for longer periods of time, because gratitude is not an ego action. And so you can hold the feelings. It's very hard to hold those huge ahas for very long, and you're not supposed to. You hold them for as long as you can, find your gratitude, let that help, and then use it to help you go forward. But you won't hold that huge feeling for like indefinitely. You just you can't hold it.
Well, it's like eating a meal that's too big. You can't digest it all. So
Perfect
yeah,
way of saying, I love that.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Gratitude is really nourishing, and if we can carry that, on our shoulder, to look around for the gratitude of it in every moment, then we're going to be taking the right steps.
Yeah, and I have to say I am personally grateful for having done some of this work already, and I know that we do the work, and then there's more. And when you do the work, there's more. You're not afraid of the more. If you haven't done some of the work or as much of the work, then the path forward could look daunting. But once you start doing some of this, and it doesn't have to be just tons all the time, but enter into it, you will realize you can handle more of what's in your front than what you thought. And so, personally, and I'd love to hear from you as well, Georgia. Like for myself, I am now at a place where I'm not going out as much as I used to. I have to find other ways of doing my work, other ways of finding my energy and doing things. And I'm helping to take care of my 96-year-old mother, which I didn't ever have to do. I mean, she is pretty much self-sufficient in a lot of ways, but she's here with me now in Raleigh, and it's different. Had I not done some of what I've done, I'm not sure I could be looking this good now and feeling this good, considering what we've all experienced with COVID, my mother being here, just other things in general, having to look very different, got to work very differently than we used to work. I'm able to handle it better. So and I would love to hear from you, Georgia, as well. Is there something that you can look at now and say, right now, this has been is there anything?
Oh, there's all kinds of stuff. I mean, certainly over the last, say, 4 or 5 years, when I look back at what I was struggling with or what I believed was impossible for me to do, I've done most of those things now. So, and certainly, yeah, to your point of you get a bit more comfortable with knowing that there's more. So certainly, after say my first big shamanic event where I had this big, huge shift and getting home and going, well, what do I do now? Oh, I still have to chop wood, carry water. But, wasn't able to bring that, wasn't able to anchor that. So now that I've done these practices and I tap every day, I do a number of other practices daily as well. But that's given me that sort of sense of presence and stability. So yeah, and I still struggle with stuff. And then as I move forward, move through, okay, well, I got that out of the way. Great, look at, I did that. I've been trying to do that for 10 years and I finally did it and I wasn't triggered. So you kind of get to the point where you can be a little more curious even, well, what is going to come up next? I didn't have curiosity until just recently because it wasn't really feeling too safe to be really curious. Because, like, I don't know what's going to come up this time. But certainly I've been able to get that curious perspective. And I'm really grateful for it. because it just totally shifts the way I can deal with what comes up. And yes,
That,
go
yeah,
ahead.
no, go ahead. No, go finish.
No, I was just going to say, to your point of, certainly we've all had some uh, unusual and interesting experiences through COVID, working within that sort of constricted energy field, but also then having different responsibilities come to you, certainly like looking after your mom. And those things, yeah, we would probably have been daunted by them
Right.
previous. Not to say that specifically the last 2 years have been, helpful or not. I guess I don't even want to judge that, but it has certainly put a lot of us in a place where we have delved more deeply and needed to delve more deeply into our self-care practices.
Right. And so I just want to put a emphasis and highlight this color about curiosity. That's a really interesting thing. So when you take a look, just as a little more explanation, when you look at all this stuff, if you are scared of your present, the past, the future, you're going to control it. And curiosity does not live in control. It has to be free to play. And so that's a wonderful sign of the work you've done and the accomplishments if you become more and more curious, which is our it's natural for us all to be curious, just like it's natural for us all to be somewhat creative. So keep that in mind. Now I want to ask you something. I would be remiss if we didn't just discuss a little bit about how do we emotionally handle things like that's going on in Ukraine. What do we do with this?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think it brings a whole range of emotions to me as I connect to it. And certainly there's fear, there's anxiety, there's anger that anyone would even consider doing what's being done. But there's also um, compassion in a way, because and this, sometimes I struggle with this, but we know that traumatized people traumatize other people. It's that dynamic. So it
So
is
you're saying misery wants company.
yeah, I guess so. I mean, it's really a reflection of our deep collective trauma that we can't figure out how to play nicely together. And I don't mean that to be trite in any way, but I think that's what we're really trying to learn how to do as we evolve as human beings. The only thing I can do for myself is to support people who are doing actions to send aid, to provide spaces for refugees, any of those practical things. I can support those. I can also support the whole of us by taking care of myself and doing my work and just trying to build a bigger foundation of peace in my life, and hopefully that will, connect with others.
So it's not a time of giving up.
Yeah.
It's not a time of saying that this is the way the world is and blah, blah, blah. This is a time to do exactly what George is saying, is to do the work, get out of bed, do your work, don't give up, don't give in, continue doing the work, share your accomplishments, whatever they are, with other people, because it gives other people permission to do their freedom steps. And the more we grow our consciousness, good energy, the more we um, do something with this trauma, the more it will spread. The more, it's interesting if you just look at certain things, how you can build a toy in the United States, and in 6 months from now, or whatever, let's say a month from now, a week from now, whatever, you're going to see something shift in some other part of the country because of that, or in a part of the world because of that toy. Things catch up even when nobody even knows about it. It's the timing is right. So do the work that we need you so desperately to do. We need everybody to come together and create this bridge of love, compassion, empathy, all of these things. And when we look at the world and things that are going on, and if I understood you correctly, Georgia, correct me if I'm wrong, look at the good things that are going on, the humanitarian things that are going on. Allow that to be more important than the other things that are going on, as hard as that may be.
Yeah, absolutely agreed. Yes, we need to continue to do the work, and we need also to recognize when we're feeling overcome by all of that. We can't. We have to be aware of what's true for us in any given moment. So in this moment, I'm just totally disgusted and upset. Well, then I'm going to do some tapping, and I'm going to recognize that, and I'm just going to hold that and process it. And then when I, get back up, I'm going to get back up and start doing some more self-care and some more sharing.
So
Yeah.
do people need to come to you to learn how to tap, or is tapping the easy part and they come to you for the processing part?
I do both. I have a number of short little videos on my YouTube channel, which I think is linked on my website. I just put up a new website last week, so I'm going to get in there and make sure that that's available. So yeah, I have some little freebie how to tap things. I also do some workshops with people. And I find that small groups are really great ways to get to learn how to tap and just do the self-regulation and the sharing, because we all share, our support when we're together. So those workshops are a great deal of fun. But I also work considerably with, individual clients, supporting them on whatever part of their journey they want to take.
And do you do it on Zoom? Do you do it on okay.
I do it on Zoom. I mean, I do a bit in person, but most of my clients are all over North America at this point. So, grateful for Zoom. Absolutely.
And are you noticing any themes in what people are coming with?
Yes, I think that because of the last number of years, we've been compressed, we've been pressed down, sort of overwhelmed. So like a lot of people are holding a lot of stuff that they've just held down simply because it hasn't been safe to let it blow. So what I'm doing is working really closely with people to develop the safe outlets to just let this trapped energy bubble out in safe and moderately controlled ways, so that people don't blow.
And I guess it's hard to say, but how long before things start to pop when you tap?
Oh gosh, it depends on how ready people are. Certainly when you're ready, things are just going to pop. And what I've found is that if you do a daily practice, whether you're thinking about anything or just tapping without words, you're going to get a little more resilient. And that's when your nervous system says, oh, okay, she's taking care of herself. Well, maybe we can just process these little things. And so if we do it regularly, then, they're going to come at whatever speed our life is allowing it. What I want to do with people, though, is work for quality of life. My perspective is, let's look at what's bubbling up. Let's not go back and stick a fork in something that's 40 years old until we can navigate this present landscape. That takes the pressure off the old stuff, and it trains our nervous system to trust us that yes, we can deal with things as they come up. Okay, so that puts us in a better space. And for many people, just that ease and that increasing quality of life is all they need. They don't necessarily need to go back into old stuff.
Into the why.
Yeah.
Because there's a million whys. I mean, it ain't one why that's doing the why.
No.
It's like a lot of
No.
pieces to that why. So why homeopathy for you?
Ah, good question. I just, again, a friend had been using it with great success. And so I went to her practitioner and was really fascinated with what was going on, had some major shifts from, looking at some of my systemic remedies and or constitutional remedies. I guess that would be the proper term, but had a huge shift working with that. And so, read up on it and was just fascinated, but it makes a total lot of sense.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? How the things that you think are ethereal
Yeah.
are the things that make the most amount of sense.
Well, everything's energy.
That's it.
Number one.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
everything. So in our final
Marilyn,
moments,
Marilyn,
what? Yes.
did you see the note in the chat?
Oh
Let
no.
me read it.
Yeah, read it for
Gilliam
me.
says, to what point would you say using EFT is suitable for self-help? At what stage would you say a practitioner or therapist would be needed to help with what might come up, either physically or mental, emotionally?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Certainly, the the very first piece of the continuum I work at is establishing self-regulation and self-safety. And so there are lots of ways you can just tap without words, to ease an upset. And I think everybody needs to use that regularly, simply to start to build resilience in the nervous system. Now, I would say that once, and I like to work with people while they're building that, but it's not 100% necessary. But what I do feel very strongly from my own trip and from working with others is that it always helps to have someone to be on the journey with you. So whether it's a therapist or a coach, um, I am going to be working to improve quality of life and to, foster growth. So whether that's post-traumatic growth or just, growth as your intentions want your life to be. It always helps to have someone to share the perspective, someone to ask you the hard questions, because I know that even myself, and I've been doing this for a long time, but even as I do, some tapping and exploring of issues, sometimes I'm not going to ask myself the harder questions. So sometimes it's really useful to have a tapping buddy or a therapist or a coach just to hold that perspective, to hold the energy for that person to actually do the healing.
That was a great question and a great answer and a whole nother show. So
And there's a note in the chat from Dr. Deepak, and he's saying the future is for energy medicine. And Georgia, he is sending his regards. He had a glitch, so that's why he didn't join us.
So next time, thanks. Deepak. We're glad you're around anyway. It always feels good when we know that you're somewhere. So just again, we're very short of time, but I do want to just ask this one last question. What did you do business-wise before you got into all of this?
I coordinated the Provincial Association of Women's Centers in Nova Scotia. And women's centers are multi-service centers working around, heavens to Betsy, all kinds of women's
domestic
issues.
Violence, whatever.
Yeah, okay. The whole shebang. So this is a lovely new step for me. I finally figured out what I want to do when I grow up. And it's all the energy that we can use to take care of ourselves.
And each other. Mm-hmm. Well, you have been marvelous. Marvelous, marvelous. Is there a final word that you want to share? A final word, something?
I just want to say I'm very grateful to you, Marilyn, and to everybody watching. Just keep tapping, and celebrate your successes and just hold yourself in coherence and love.
That's perfect. Thank you very much for being here. And I would just say, as a coach as well, they taught us years ago, and in heart math in particular, they said, don't tell if you can ask, right? That's the job of a coach, is to ask, not to tell. And the same thing about our clients is to ask. Ask the questions that pop up. Find the person that when these things pop up, they're subtle, that you have somebody to ask and somebody to share the information with. It's very important. And anyway, HWC, Homeopathy World Community, we do this once a month, the Health and Show, in honor of homeopathy, natural medicine, anything, energy, anything that is going to help us move forward, feel better, sustainable, all of those things. We'd love to see you come back. We have guests every month. We have all kinds of events. We have a book club. We have webinars. We have courses. We have terrific classes and, just participants. So please join us anytime. You can be a member. We'd love to have you always. So homeopathyworldcommunity.com. Come visit us, and we're here with an open arm. So with that, I want to thank Amnon so very much for being here and for helping us, and all of you out there. We love you. Take today's messages and go out in the world and see what you can. Be curious. Be curious. Thank you all so much. Have a wonderful day.
You are tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. If you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it in the archives section at nissancommunications.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter, and like us on Facebook. Sponsored by StreamingGear.com, Carolina Apparel, and DeltaForce.net.